Joining us now with more on this is Texas Republican Congressman Will Hurd. He serves as vice chair of the Maritime and Border Security Subcommittee for Homeland Security. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us on.
Your district covers more miles of the U.S.-Mexico border than any other, and you released a statement earlier today I'd like to share with our viewers. You said, quote, about this proposed wall, building a wall is the most expensive and least effective way to secure the border. Each section of the border faces unique geographical, cultural, and technological challenges that would be best addressed with a flexible sector-by-sector approach that empowers the agents on the ground with the resources they need. Now, you say that you're advocating for a, quote, more intelligence-led approach. Please explain to our viewers what you mean by that.
Sure. In the district that I represent, part of it is the Chihuahuan Desert. And building a wall in the middle of the desert is a colossal waste of money if you don't have Border Patrol agents to respond to a threat along that wall. There are 19 transnational criminal organizations that are operating in Mexico. Some of the money that we could be using to build the wall can go to the NSA and the CIA to increase the intelligence on those organizations operating in Mexico. We should be working closer with our Mexican partners and stop the problem before it actually gets to our border. These are all things that will be used that can be a lot cheaper than building a wall. The wall, the estimates are anywhere between $9 billion, that's what the B, to $40 billion. And to put some context to that number, the entire national intelligence budget is $53 billion. So I want to be a good steward of the American people's money and make sure that we're spending this money in a smart fashion, because a one-size-fits-all solution to border security does not work. What you need in San Diego is very different than what you need in El Paso or Eagle Pass, which are cities in my district.
But the president is insisting that Mexico will ultimately pay for this wall. One of his suggestions that's been put out there is possibly a 20% tax on all imports from Mexico. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think people are forgetting that exports and imports create jobs here in the United States. And a tax of this nature is going to impact everyone. We're going to see that the ultimate loser in a trade war like this is the American consumer. We're going to see everything from beer to gasoline to cars, the price is increasing. This impacts all of us. We have to remember that Canada, the United States, and Mexico, we build things together. And when you have an impact on any one of these partners, this is going to have a gigantic impact on our bottom line, on prices, on consumer goods, and it's going to ultimately could potentially impact jobs.
House Speaker Paul Ryan sat down recently with Politico, and they asked him about whether he thinks Mexico should pay for the wall. Here's what he had to say.
So I'm not going to get into a quibbling about whether they should or should not pay for it. We got to get this thing done because we said we would do it. Now we have to deliver.
So he said that we said we would do it. How much of this is trying to just fulfill a campaign promise, and how much of this is really trying to secure the border?
Well, the reality is the world we live in is more dangerous than our parents, and the world our children might inherit is more dangerous than ours. And so border security is important, but we must remember that Mexico is our partner in this fight. They have spent hundreds of billions of pesos dealing in their war on drugs. They have this similar problem. And one of the things I learned, I was an undercover officer in the CIA for 9.5 years. One of the things I learned when I was in the CIA is be nice tonight with nice guys, tough with tough guys. Make sure your friends trust you and your enemies fear you. Mexico is our friend, they're our neighbor, they're our partner. We should be working together on this problem, not creating or driving a wedge in that relationship.
Well, from Mexico to Russia, let's take that turn. You've been very outspoken about Russia's meddling during the U.S. presidential election. President Trump is expected to have his first call with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Saturday. What are you hoping that the president will say during that conversation?
President Trump is a tough guy, and I hope he continues that with the Russian president. Vladimir Putin is not an ally. He is an adversary, and we need to treat him as such. Many U.S. presidents have sought a reset in the relationship, and they have failed. The hacking of the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic Campaign Congressional Committee is an attack on all of us. Look, those organizations spent a lot of money to try to unseat me in my recent reelection. But an attack on them is an attack on all of us. And when the GRU, that's the Russian military intelligence organization, briefs these programs, what the intelligence community refers to as Grizzly Step, this is going to go down as one of the greatest covert action campaigns in the history of Mother Russia. Not because Donald Trump won. Donald Trump won fair and square. There was no manipulation of our vote tallying system. But this is going to go down in their history because it created a wedge, whether real or perceived, between our chief executive, the intelligence communities, and the American public. And this is something that these confusion they're continuing to try to stoke. They're doing that in France, they're doing it in Germany, and we can't let this go forward. And I was glad to hear that our president is not going to discuss sanctions or the relief of sanctions in this call. That's an important tool that we have in order to make sure Vladimir Putin is an honest broker.
I'd like to touch on another subject, and that is health care. At the GOP retreat, some Republican lawmakers reportedly aired some sharp concerns about the effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act. What can you tell us about that?
Well, first off, we have to remember this is a flawed law. In Texas, my home state, the premiums are going to have increased at on average 36%. We're likely to see another premium increase in March because of Obamacare. When I crisscross this district, it takes 10 and a half hours to drive 80 miles across my district. I hear the same concern. What is the deductible, and why is it $10,000? If you have health insurance and your deductible is $10,000, you basically don't have health insurance. So we have to remember this is a broken law that is actually driving up costs for people. There's a misconception. Our plan to make healthcare more affordable actually is supportive of, if you have a pre-existing condition, you should not be precluded from getting access to insurance. We want to make sure we increase competition. When the original Obamacare was passed, there were about 28 exchanges. Right now, there's only 5. There are a couple of dozen states that only have one provider for insurance. When you don't have competition, that's when you see prices rise. So we're looking to increase competition. We're not going to pull the rug out from anyone. And the part of the problem with Obamacare was it was like a 27,000-page document. We're not going to do the same thing. Many of the repeals are going to be done piecemeal. Some of the things that we're going to replace it with are going to be done piecemeal. And Secretary Price, or I guess I should say Secretary-elect Tom Price, the new head of HHS, has a lot of tools in his toolkit that he can use, like growing the bronze plan, so you have more plans available for people to get access to. So this is, we could have waited 2 years and let this thing implode, but it's too important, and we got to make sure that Americans have access to health care that they can afford.
You said that you weren't going to pull the rug out on anyone, so are you basically reassuring Americans, Congressman, that everyone will have health care once this is all said and done?
We're making sure that people are going to be able to have access to affordable health care. That's the goal, and that is the conversations that we're going to be having. And this is going to take a lot of conversation. There's multiple plans, and we're going to go about this in a methodical way and ensure that people understand what's happening, what's changing, so that there's no confusion with what's happening with their insurance or their health care.
It's been a great conversation. Congressman Will Hurd, thank you.
Thank you.